Stash tabs are an important part of Path of Exile. Today, I'm going to be going over how they work, the different types of specialized stash tabs available, affinities and folders, and end everything off with a few recommendations on what you should buy if you're looking to pick up the most efficient, though you're free to spend your money however you like. Now, before I get into it, a quick note for the new people. With free-to-play games, there are often concerns of pay-to-win. I have them myself, especially going into a free-to-play title. Stash tabs do expand your inventory and grant significantly more space and improved functionality over the base tabs that you get. However, it's not like you can keep buying stash tabs to keep gaining more and more advantages to the point where someone who spent $1,000 is significantly ahead of someone who spent $100. And even if you're one of the worst hoarding exiles on the planet, you're probably gonna end up running out of stuff that you want to keep long before you need hundreds of stash tabs. As for other things you can purchase in Path of Exile, character slots, those are just letting you keep old characters, another form of hoarding, and cosmetic microtransactions, which, while they may look cool enough that you'd think they're pay to win, they don't actually change anything, and in fact many exiles regard MTX as pay to lose because they tend to cause weird lag and make it harder to see your screen, so you're more likely to stand in the fire. And if you want to know more about Path of Exile or other games in general, do be sure to get subscribed, leave a like while you're down there, and for now, let's get into things. So first up, your stash. It's this thing right here in your hideout or in town. This is where you store all your junk. I have a lot of junk. That's why I have quite a few stash tabs. You can purchase more stash tabs by hitting your M key to bring up the shop. You'll see various things here, and you come to stash tabs. Here are all the options. So I'm going to go through each along with pricing. Now I don't know how this works in other currencies. But in America, and I am American, the way it works is pretty simple. 1 point is 10 cents, so 10 points are $1. So this tab right here, for 40 points, if I were to buy this, I would be spending $4. While it isn't necessarily as clear as putting everything in dollar values, it's still a lot better than most games, so I'm going to give GGG an A- for transparency here. Now the first and most basic thing that you can purchase is the Humble Stash tab. This adds an extra tab to your shared stash and costs $3. Or alternatively, you can go the Stash Tab Bundle, where you get 6 of them for $15. But I wouldn't recommend this, because basic stash tabs have significantly less functionality than their premium counterparts. So instead, a premium stash tab costs $4. Or you can get 6 premium stash tabs for $20, and if you have some of those basic tabs, like the ones that you start with, you can upgrade them to premium for $1.50 each. Now let's get into a little bit about why premium tabs are so much better. Using this one as an example. On premium tabs, you can right-click to customize. You can name it anything you want. Let's go with that. I mean, I call everything TRTHF, so that's basically perfect. You can set it to public. This allows other players to easily see the contents of the tab through the game's API. And if you put your most valuable treasures, like these remnants of corruption in here, you can set a price, and these are very valuable, so I'm going to set it for divine orbs and sell them for 100. I really need these, so I'm only going to give them up if someone gives me a lot of currency for them. Now another advantage of premium tabs is you can make them pretty colors. I guess that's not an advantage, but I definitely like it. And you might be thinking, okay, well, premium tabs seem really, really important. You can't trade without them, right? Players won't see your items. Sort of. While players won't see your items listed on the trade site by default, unless you have a premium tab, you can list items on the Path of Exile forums, where they will then be picked up by indexers, and players can interact with them. So you could trade without premium tabs, but there are extra steps, and premium tabs streamline the process. So that's why premium tabs are much better than basic ones, and why you're probably going to want to buy at least a couple premium tabs as some of your first purchases if you're going to be trading and playing in Path of Exile. I'm going to take this out now because, as I said earlier, it's valuable and I don't want someone to purchase it. Oh, and if you have something super valuable, let's say these are so valuable that I don't actually want people to purchase it at all, you can select Do Not Index. Now, even though the tab is public, people won't see the item. So that's a fun fact if you happen to be storing your gear in a tab and don't want to get annoyed because someone's messaging you for it every 5 seconds. Next, we have the Premium Quad tab for $15. It's like you took 4 regular stash tabs and squished them together. Now, let's look into this a little bit and talk about space. This is a Premium Quad tab with a beautiful 24 by 24 grid. A normal stash tab has a 12 by 12 grid, and your inventory has a 12 by 5 grid. So 160 spaces in your So that's 60 spaces in your inventory, the default, 144 spaces in your stash tabs by default, and 576 spaces to put whatever you want in a quad tab. Do keep in mind, some items take up more space than others. For example, this ring here, that takes up 1 space in a tab, so I could store 576 rings. But these gloves take up 4 spaces, so I could only store 144 of them in my beautiful quad tab. Another tab that gets talked about a lot, and with good reason, is the currency stash tab. This is $7.50, and it's used to store up to 5,000 of each currency type with some floating slots. A normal stash tab has 144 spaces, but that doesn't necessarily mean it stores 144 items. So that is an important distinction here. Now, the currency stash tab still has way more space, but you'll notice this stacks to 20. So a normal stash tab could store 2,880 chaos orbs if that's all you put in there, and they're all full stacks. This stores about double that, along with 5,000 of every other currency. Based on the stack size, this is more or less than about 2 normal stash tabs for every currency type in the game. It also stores exotic currencies. You have a crafting window here, and down at the bottom you can store pretty much whatever you want, so long as it's a currency type item. Then there's the Fragment tab, which stores all the fragments used to fight bosses, including invitations, all the breach stones and splinters and all that, and all your scarabs, which is quite a lot for $7.50. Like with the currency tab, it stores 5,000 of each. And this is a doozy. You've got all your general stuff here. This is boss stuff. Then you've got breach stuff here. Then you've got scarab stuff here. You can even upgrade them by combining. Just click like this, and there you go. If you don't have this, you can do that at the vendor by vendoring 3 and getting one of a higher. And last up, your invitations go here. Next up, we have the Divination Stash tab, which is used to store 5,000 of each divination card, and even has some handy sorting options, such as if you only want to see the divination cards you own or only divination cards that you have full stacks of. The Divination Stash tab costs $5. Now, another tab that I have a long history with is the Essence tab. It costs $4 and stores 5,000 of each essence. It also has the same upgrade feature as the Scarab tab did. Again, you can just vendor 3 essences though, so this isn't an advantage. It's just a little bit easier than having to walk to the vendor, but honestly, half the time I walk to the vendor anyway because I forget I can do it in my tab. And if you want to know how to farm some essences to put in the tab, well, I have a farming guide dedicated to essence, which I'll link up in the card and down below. The reason I like essence so much is it's one of the most profitable moneymakers in the game, especially early in a league, and especially when your character isn't geared. But for more about that, check out the guide after this video. Then we have the Gem tab, which allows you to store and sort gems. It costs $4 and sorts and stores up to 500 total. You can use various sorting methods, such as the gem's color or its level, or level requirement as well. Then the Flask tab stores 500 flasks. It sorts them by general type, quality, all sorts of fun stuff, even level brackets as well. There's all sorts of sorting features for all of these tabs, which does make them very user-friendly. Then next up, we have all of the league-specific tabs, such as the Blight Stash tab. For $4, this stores your blighted oils and blighted maps. Or alternatively, you could get the Ultimatum Stash tab, which stores your catalysts and your inscribed ultimatums. Maybe you like delving? Yep, there's a tab for that as well that stores fossils, resonators, and even has crafting space. Though I really wish you could store loaded resonators and stack them together. Unfortunately, that feature isn't yet supported, but who knows, maybe in the future. Delirium tab stores all of your Delirium orbs and Simulacrum maps, for maps to which layers of Delirium have been applied. All of these League-specific tabs cost $4. Then we have 2 more specialty tabs, which work a little bit differently from the others and also are a little pricier. First is the Unique Collection tab. This holds exactly one of each unique item in the game and costs $14. If you're just looking to store uniques while you're selling them, this isn't really the best, since it only holds one of each item. But if you're playing solo self-found or just looking to collect stuff for fun, then this can be a quite handy way to store things, as there's a lot of uniques in PoE. And then last, but certainly not least, is the Map Stash tab, another very, very important one, probably in my top 3 personally. This stores 72 of each type of map. Now there are over 100 maps on the Path of Exile Atlas, and several of the maps exist at different tiers. So what happens is your inventory gets very, very clogged. Even years and years ago, when the Atlas system was much simpler, I found that I was often filling 3 to 4 tabs with maps before this came out. So it is very handy, it saves a lot of space, and if you happen to want to run, say, 60 of the same map, well, don't worry, it can hold 72. And you can even use it in Standard to convert old maps to a new series. The first important feature of stash tabs which I want to talk about is affinities. You can set an affinity by right-clicking a tab, and then selecting from the available list. Specialty tabs, like the Delve tab, can only have their own affinity, but then a premium stash tab can have any of the available affinities. When a tab has an affinity, items placed into any other tab automatically go there. So for example, these remnants of corruption are related to the essence mechanic. Therefore, they have the essence affinity, which I have set up on my essence tab. So if I put them in this tab by control clicking, they disappear. It's not in my tab. Instead, it's right over here. However, if I do this by control shift left clicking, it will ignore the affinity and force it into the tab that you currently have selected. Any regular or premium stash tab can have any of these, and the specialty affinities also happen to be very specific, but are always there. On the other hand, there are what are called lockers. These work like free stash tabs for specific league mechanics. So the next time GGG adds a mechanic that has stuff to store, don't worry, you won't have to rush out and buy a tab. In fact, they haven't added stash tabs that relate to league mechanics in a very, very long time. So, instead, you can get a locker. These are placed in your hideout. They show up right here among your hideout decorations. And when you place one down, you get to set the affinity just like with a stash tab. If you do, things will automatically go into it. And here's where it gets really cool. I have the expedition affinity set on my expedition locker. If I go to not the locker, but my regular stash tab, yep, that's right, it works. If your affinities aren't enabled by default, you can just click on the cog right here. And if you want to jump to the tab as the item goes in, enable affinity auto navigation. But personally, I find it unpleasant, so I leave it off. Now, the other feature of stash tabs that you should probably know about is folders. So if I create a new folder here, I can just see that this is automatically in it because that's what I had selected. If I want more tabs to be in it, I can just drag and drop. And there we go. My folder has all these tabs. I can rename it to stuff, or if I don't like it anymore, I can delete it and my stash tabs are back. This is great for organizing your stash tabs, especially when you want to put something aside and don't necessarily want it to be active at the moment. So now that you have an idea of what the stash tabs do, I'm going to go over a general priority for when you're looking to support the developers of Path of Exile in exchange for some stash tabs, what you should be buying. Again, this is not me telling you how to spend your money. If you want to buy a completely different series of tabs, that's totally fine. This is just what I recommend to most people in terms of the best value. So, let's start with the basics, which is 315 points, or $31.50. You can kind of think of the basics and the very useful tabs combined as a box price for Path of Exile. The very first thing you should do is upgrade one of your tabs to a premium tab to make trading in Path of Exile easier. Since trade is such a big part of, well, Trade League at least. If you're playing in SSF, then this advice doesn't really impact you. However, most people do play softcore trade, so that's what I'm going to categorize the advice for. I will make a special note of SSF a little bit later on one of the tabs. You'll also want a currency tab to store all of your currency items, so they're not taking up space in your other tabs. a map tab, and a fragment tab. These are by far the most useful because not only do they have the most space, but they're the things you want to store the most of. You'll end up having hundreds of scarabs, hundreds of maps, and hundreds of currency items, hopefully thousands of currency. Hopefully you're very rich and successful. And so these are the essentials, the things that you absolutely want. Next up, there are some tabs that I would consider to be very useful, such as a quad tab, which you can use as a dump tab. You've got stuff, you don't want that stuff, just put it in the quad tab and deal with it later. Or better yet, you can put it in the quad tab, have a price on that tab, and then just sell it, because some people might buy it. And if the price isn't right, well, you can always take it out and reprice it manually if you're getting a ton of whispers, or alternatively, just lower it over time and eventually it'll probably sell, and if not, vendor it. I mean, it's not like it was doing you any use anyway, unsold. In addition, there's the Divination and Essence tab. Divination tab because it's really hard to tell div cards apart, and it's very annoying to keep track of what you have and what you don't have without the tab, at least in my opinion. Essence tab because, well, if you're farming a lot of essences and crafting with essences, it's pretty good to store them, although I will admit the quad and div tab are slightly more useful than the essence tab. These combine to 250 points or $25, meaning that for less than the price of the average AAA game, you can get everything you need in PoE to have a pretty good time. Because after this, you don't really need anything, it's just icing on the cake. And oh boy, can trading in Path of Exile be an absolutely delicious cake. So next up, the mechanics tabs and additional premium tabs. If you find yourself farming Delve a lot and want to store all the fossils easily, get a Delve tab. If you find yourself farming Ultimatum, Delirium, or Blight and want to store stuff from that, especially the maps, again, get the tab. And if you just find yourself running out of space, grab a couple extra premium tabs. None of these are individually essential, and some players may not find any use of them. So this is very much it depends. Just like the situational tabs, some of which I don't actually recommend you buy, and some of which definitely comes down to you. So first up, I don't ever recommend that you buy basic tabs. They have less functionality than premium tabs and aren't that much cheaper at the end of the day. You'll save $1 for each tab you buy, but ultimately the time and effort to make a basic tab do useful things just isn't worth it in my opinion. Then there's the gem tab, flask tab, and unique tab. If you plan to pick up and trade a lot of flasks, then the flask tab is handy. If you plan to do more than just pick up some gems to vendor them for gem cutters prisms, the gem tab is handy. But most people won't get very much use out of either of these. And as for the unique tab, like I mentioned, because it only stores one thing and it's more of a collection tool, unless you're playing SSF, I don't think it's very useful. But again, if you enjoy it or want the functionality of collecting stuff, feeling like you're checking stuff off a list, then absolutely go for it. Last up, as a pro tip, around once a month, GGG tends to have a stash tab sale. And during a sale is the best time to pick up any stash tabs that you happen to feel like you're lacking. And so that's everything that you need to know about stash tabs in Path of Exile. Now personally, I kind of have more stash tabs than I need. A lot of my tabs end up having quite a bit of empty space in them. And this is because I've played Path of Exile for around a decade, I very much enjoy the game, and I've bought several supporter packs because I enjoy it and want to support the devs. But if you're not planning to do anything crazy, you really don't need that many stash tabs to have a good time in Path of Exile. I've played a lot of free-to-play games. In fact, I used to play really bad free-to-play web games, and their monetization was pretty darn similar to today's mobile games. There would always be something stopping you from having fun. And Path of Exile really isn't set up that way. Instead, it's set up such that as long as you're fair to the developers, then they're going to be fair to you. And with very few purchases, you will get all of Path of Exile's future content completely free. And at this point, I'm pretty sure you're also going to get all of Path of Exile 2's content completely free as well. They haven't officially said everything about their monetization models for PoE 2 or PoE Mobile, but everything they have said says that it's going to be pretty much the same as Path of Exile 1. But there's one thing that I'm a little bit curious about. Are you a hoarder? When it comes to video games, especially RPGs, do you save all the items because you might need them later, or do you use them as you get them? And if so, do you find that you're constantly lacking stash space in games? Personally, Path of Exile is one of the few games where I don't save absolutely everything, and so while I think I have plenty of stash tab space here, in many other games my tabs are constantly full and I'm wondering, do I really need this? Yes, but I found it at level 7. I mean, it's been with me for a long time, so I should absolutely keep it, right? I don't know. Maybe I just hoard too much, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you're looking for something else to watch, maybe check out that Essence guide, which I'll link up in the card and down below. Or if you like reading, you can always check out a full stash tab guide, including references to what each stash tab does and some recommendations of what to buy. Well, that'll be over at MaxwellGG, also linked down in the description below. With that said, thanks for watching, and a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for the continued support. Link to that is down below, and who knows, you might even see your name on screen right now, just like these fine folks here. The term pay to win in video games gets thrown around a lot. Sometimes it means very specific things, other times people use it to refer to the ability to purchase literally anything. Personally, I always try to look at it through a lens of fairness. Is the game constantly set up to make you feel bad for not spending money and then continuing to spend money? Because I think we can all agree that paying $60 for a game is pretty reasonable given how much time and money goes into making a lot of games. Now, the exact game, the exact content, and the exact dollar amount are definitely up for debate. Some games are not worth $60. Some games are probably worth more. But I've always found that with Path of Exile, GGG has taken a very fair stance. When players said, hey, we don't like that every new league mechanic requires more space and seems to have its own tab, GGG said, all right, fair enough. They will still require space, but we'll give you a free locker rather than forcing you to buy a tab. So as long as that continues, I'd say Path of Exile is one of the best free-to-play games out there. But that's all for me today. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you again sometime soon.